In this video, we will show you how to replace your alternator on this Honda Civic. This will be located in your engine compartment on the passenger side front of your engine. Let's get into it. On the battery, you'll find that you have a 10mm nut holding the cable in place. Let's loosen this just enough that we can remove the cable from the battery itself. Once you have that off of there, just give it a quick inspection for corrosion, clean it up as necessary. We'll set that aside. Now we can start taking off the belt, but before you do, you want to make sure you take note of that belt routing. So when we go to put the belt back on, it'll be in the exact same route. Now we can make our way over towards the passenger side of the engine. We're going to remove the serpentine belt from along the alternator pulley. Use a 19mm wrench right on this area of the tensioner. We're going to have to apply pressure counterclockwise here, pushing it towards the rear of the vehicle. That will release tension. Now we can take that belt and slide it right out of place. Remove your tool from the area. Now we can start disconnecting the wiring along the top of the alternator. We'll start with the wiring for the AC compressor. It comes right along this area. To do this, you can use a small pocket screwdriver or a pick. Up along this area, there's a small squeeze tab. You can squeeze that in either by finger or just get underneath this tab and gently pry it up. You don't want to break it because we do need this to lock back in position when we go to reinstall it. Every time you disconnect an electrical connector, take a peek. If you see any funny colors, that's corrosion and it would need to be dealt with. Let's get this off of the alternator as well. Let's make our way to the other side of this bracket and you'll find that there's a 10mm headed bolt holding the bracket to the alternator. Let's get that bolt out of there and remove the wiring. Now we can pull this out of place. We'll give it a quick inspection. Now looking along this bracket, you can tell that there is two wire connectors that come right down along this area. Those are to hold the wire steady. Ours are broken, but typically you would just want to make your way inside of this area and gently pry them out of place. We'll continue removing the wiring. We have a rubber protective boot over this connector. We'll just gently pry that out of place. In this area, there's a small squeeze tab. Once again, we'll squeeze that in and disconnect this. Quick check. Move along to your next wiring harness directly underneath this boot. To remove this, we'll be using a 10mm. Take hold of that wire, we'll lift it up and off of there. Check it for corrosion on both sides. You want to make sure that's nice and clean. Now we can take this wiring and just put it aside. We have this bracket mounted directly to the alternator. Use your 10mm to remove it. At this point, to continue removing the alternator, you'll find that you have two 12mm headed bolts holding it in place. One's up along the top, out in the open. The other one will be directly underneath this pulley. It's a little harder to get to. I like to start with the hardest one to get to. Make my way down here with my 12mm. We'll remove that mounting bolt and then we'll do the same to the top mounting bolt. Let's move up to that upper mounting bolt. Keep in mind, this is the last thing holding the alternator in place. It does have a metal bushing that will hold pressure and temporarily hold it in place, so you don't necessarily have to worry about it falling out. We will have to gently pry it out of place. Now we'll carefully use a pry bar in between the alternator and this bracket and gently pry this out of place. While you're doing so, be extremely careful that the alternator does not fall and potentially damage anything. Now over on the bench, along the backside of the alternator, you'll find that you have two brackets. We want to remove the pair of those. For each one, you'll find that you'll be using a 10mm to remove the mounting bolts. Once you have that off of there, just give it a quick inspection. We'll transfer that over to the brand new alternator. Double check to make sure that is secured. We'll do the same to the other bracket. Let's get this over to the vehicle. All right, let's install that alternator. We'll take this and put it in position. Start in each one of the mounting bolts before you snug either of them. Now let's tighten the lower bolt and then the upper. Now that we have these two mounting bolts tight, let's torque them to 17 foot-pounds. Now let's continue on to our wiring. We'll grab the harness that's coming from the AC compressor. We'll connect these two together. Press it in, listen for a click, give it a tug. Continue on to the connector that leads to the top of the alternator. Make sure you press that in and then put the protective boot over it. Time for the wire along the top of the alternator. Slide that right over the stud. With that nut bottomed out, torque it to 6 foot-pounds. We'll protect that as well. Now we just want to make sure that we secure our wiring. There should be those little clips that come along the side here. If yours were broken, you want to replace those, of course, or just use a wire tie of some sort. Now let's get this bracket lined up. Start in that mounting bolt, tighten it up. Now it's time to put the belt back up and onto the alternator. While we're bringing this up, you're going to notice it's under tension. You want to double check to make sure it's around all the pulleys as close as possible. Then we'll be using our 19mm wrench right down here on the tensioner. We'll be twisting this counterclockwise towards the rear of the vehicle to release tension from the area, and then we can slide the belt over as needed. Let's get our 19mm wrench on here. You can also be using a Serpentine belt tool, whatever is best for you. Let's double check to make sure it's on all those pulleys. Assuming that looks good, go ahead and release the tension there. Let's make our way over to the battery. We'll press that negative battery terminal all the way down onto the battery, as far as possible. Use your 10mm and make sure that nut is nice and tight. Double check the cable to make sure it is secured properly to the battery. Okay friends, we fully installed our power steering pulley. At this point, it's time to climb into the passenger compartment and start up your car for approximately 5 seconds. We'll turn it right back off and make our way back out here. Triple check that belt. If it's off by even one tooth on one pulley, you could destroy that belt and cause some damage. So you want to be sure. Aside from that, go ahead and take your vehicle for a road test. Thanks for watching.
When only the best will do, demand TRQ. The only company that lets you view before you do. TRQ is committed to offering the highest quality aftermarket auto parts that are engineered for peace of mind. Thanks for using and viewing with TRQ.